All right. Hello again, Avengers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is number 14, and today we are going to answer the question, why are so many YouTubers quitting? Because it's normal. What are you talking about? We've never seen this many big YouTubers. Okay, let's talk about not YouTube. Let's talk about how business works. One of the aspects of starting your own business is looking at the market that you want to get into. And one of the measurements of a market is how often new companies enter the market and how often old companies leave the market. The thing that allows new companies to enter the market and decides how difficult to that are these things that we call barriers to entry. So a market that has extremely high barriers to entry generally will see very few new companies entering the market. And then companies leaving the market. I don't know if there's anything. Basically, if there's a really high barrier to entry, a lot of times the market itself is not going to have a ton of companies leaving because there's nothing to kind of pick up the slack. The lower the barrier of entry is, the more often you have old companies leaving and new companies joining. And a healthy market should have a regular exodus of old companies leaving with new companies entering it. New companies come in, create new competition. A lot of times they will bring new ideas and new technologies to the market that the established companies either have to adapt to continue working or encourages them to go away. Now, what does this have to do with YouTube? Well, the reason so many big creators are leaving, which they're not, the two that have been talked about the most recently were Tom Scott, who flat out said, I'm not leaving, I'm just not going to be doing a video a week because I've been doing it for 10 years. And then MatPat, who had this really tearful goodbye to the internet, which really wasn't goodbye. He's simply just not hosting anymore. He's not hosting any of the Theorist channels. And this situation involving MatPat is actually a perfect example of why older companies leaving a market to make room for new companies is a good thing. It's a good thing that MatPat is stepping down from hosting. Why? Because there are new hosts that are now getting a chance to learn the things that Matt learned. But fortunately for them, they don't have to learn it entirely on their own. They have all of the resources that MatPat has created over his decade in the industry, and now they can start creating their own ideas and creating their own stuff. And I'm going to be blunt with you guys here. The Theorist channels in and of themselves have been kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel for a couple years now. There's just not that many things for them to create these really obtuse theories about, and a lot of them kind of grasp at straws and stuff like that. So my prediction, based entirely on my own thoughts and nothing more elaborate than that, is I don't believe the Theorists, the new hosts for the Theorist channels, are going to do remarkably well for those channels. That doesn't mean that their careers are now over. They're never going to be able to do anything ever again. No, they're going to learn things in there, and then they're going to take it wherever they go next. And it might still be on YouTube. It might be on Twitch. It might be completely outside of the entertainment sector. But that's one of the kind of important parts of companies, closing to when new companies enter a market. The new company, generally the old company is already established. The people that founded it have already made a significant amount of money off of it. Now, a lot of that money may be gone at that point. There's a lot of different reasons companies make a close. Sometimes it's because of bankruptcy and stuff like that. And then the person that owned that company is kind of fucked. But other times it's just as simple as, well, the company's run its course. It's becoming significantly more difficult to compete in the field, so they're going to close it and be able to ensure that they're actually making money off of it. It's really, really common thing. The other thing, like, everyone's going, well, why is it happening now? Well, because about 10 years ago, YouTube got really big, and a lot of people started YouTube. MatPat, again, I believe MatPat started a little over a decade ago. Tom Scott literally said, yeah, it's been exactly 10 years since I did this. The average lifespan of a small business, which the absolute vast majority, like 99.999999999999999% of YouTube channels would be considered small businesses. Do you want to know what the average lifespan of a small business is? Depending on the market that you're in, it's about 4.1 years. That's right. They only last about 4 years. Now, there are some markets where you can double that to where the average lifespan gets to about 8 years. Both MatPat and Tom Scott have already gone past the average lifespan of a small business. And neither of them are shutting their business doors. They are simply refocusing themselves somewhere else. So their small business is technically beating the odds by quite a bit. Something like 70% of small businesses don't make it through 2 years. It's absolutely insane just how difficult it is to be an entrepreneur. Which, if you're unfamiliar with that term, is basically someone that makes their own business. So the idea that all these big YouTubers are quitting, first of all, they're not. Second of all, that's how it works. That's how the market works. We are so used to YouTube being this itty bitty baby market that we are not used to seeing it react like a normal market. We're not used to seeing businesses close, especially large established businesses, but that's what happens in literally every market. And then when we bring into the idea of lockdowns and all the stuff that's happened over the past 3 to 4 years, the fact that a lot of these businesses are still open on YouTube is insane. During lockdowns, we saw the largest transfer of wealth from small businesses to large corporations in the history of the world. Something like 50 or I don't remember the exact numbers. It was above 50. It's somewhere between 50 and like 80% of businesses that closed 2 weeks to flatten the curve never opened again. We saw this incredible economic reaping happen just a couple of years ago, and anyone that was still existing after that did something amazing, but eventually that runs out. And so now people are picking up on it because popular people are closing, and it's not because they're being forced to close. Like, we've seen other big YouTubers just disappear off of YouTubers like Jenna Marbles. But they didn't close because of economic conditions. No, they closed because they were bullied off the internet. And we've seen that happen with other creators and stuff like that. But it's relatively rare, and it generally, anytime it happens, people come up with some sort of explanation aside from, hey, this is how the market works. And again, YouTube, really big established YouTube channels tend to break the rules as far as markets are concerned. Again, average lifespan of a small business is about 4 years. Fun fact, average lifespan of a large business, like on the S&P 500, the Fortune 500 companies, used to be in 70 or something like that. Average lifespan of a business on the S&P 500 was about 68 to 70 years. In 2017, 18, 20, somewhere around there, recently, within the past like 5 to 6 years, that number has gone down to 18 years. Meaning in 20 years, the current Fortune 500 companies and the current companies on the S&P 500 are not going to exist anymore. They're going to close. The lifespan of a business has shortened extremely. A lot of that due to the fact that barriers to entry have been lowering everywhere. Remember, I mentioned before, the lower the barrier to entry, the more likely that the established businesses are going to start closing because they have to deal with competition, and eventually competition will get so large that a company just can't compete anymore for a number of different reasons. It's very, very rare for a company to outlive all of its competitors. And basically when that happens, they have to kind of be kind of a mega conglomerate style company like Walmart or Microsoft or something like that, where they have the money to basically weather any kind of competition that's coming towards them. And even with massive businesses like that, like a really good example, BlackBerry was the #1 phone on the market in the 90s and early 2000s. And they made the decision that no one was ever going to want to give up their physical keyboards. So these full touchscreen phones that had no buttons on them, no one's going to be using these ever, ever again. Nope, it's not going to happen. Now BlackBerry doesn't exist. They stopped creating phones. I want to say in the last couple of years here, they just completely stopped creating phones. And I think they still try to create software, but they're out of the hardware market. And they were the market leader 20 years ago. This is how it works, folks. Markets are constantly changing as barriers to entry lower. New established companies have to continue to adapt, and eventually they will get to the point where they cannot continue to adapt and they will leave the market, and that makes room for new businesses to fill in the gap. In a bad market or in a non-competitive market, when one company leaves, the kind of power vacuum that's left there is kind of absorbed by the other companies, and eventually you get these kind of pseudo monopolies and oligopolies where there's only a few companies that have control over the entire market, and that generally means very, very bad things for consumers. There's really nothing that they can do because in these particular markets the barrier to entry is so high. A really great example is cable TV and internet and things like that. There's really only a few providers throughout the entire country, and in most countries that's the same thing. Why? Because the barrier to entry to starting a new internet provider is unbelievably large, because either you have to use someone else's infrastructure, you have to use someone else's cable lines and stuff like that they have already done, and either that means that you have to pay them a significant amount of money, or they just tell you to go fuck yourself, or you have to lay all of your own lines, which is unbelievably expensive, prohibitively expensive, to the point where you would have to have billions of dollars to start a new internet provider. And even then, you would run into zoning issues, you would run into permit issues. It would be unbelievably difficult. So now we almost have like mafia style areas where you have the different internet service providers going, what we're going to do here is you're going to take care of the internet from Hoboken to South 7th Street, and I'll take care of the internet from here to here. And they just don't compete with each other almost at all. And it's nuts, and it's been that way for a couple decades now. When we look at something like YouTube, however, the barrier to entry has never been lower. Literally anyone can start a YouTube channel and start doing things. Now, there are some barriers to entry, not from the kind of technological side, but just from the entertainment side. Anyone can start their own YouTube channel, but if you don't have good sound, no one's going to watch it. If you don't have a good quality camera, no one's going to watch it. And so there are some barriers to entry that make it more difficult to start, but compared to something like opening your own store, the barriers to entry are extremely low, and a lot of those barriers are not monetary, they are skill-based. And skill-based barriers are easier to overcome than monetary or red tape based barriers where there's permitting or licensures and other things like that prevent you from getting in. Those significantly more difficult than learning a new skill. So now we have this market that now has been around long enough for us to see some of the established businesses starting to leave the market to make room for new ones. And we are constantly seeing new creators getting big really, really quickly. And then they'll be gone just as quickly, generally because we find out that they're horrible people for some odd reason, but who knows? So the idea that YouTube is over and all these people, what's going to happen to YouTube in the next 10 years? Oh, it's going to be very different than it is now. Just like if you go back to YouTube 10 years ago, it was a very, very different place. Again, when I got started on YouTube I think it's a little over 11 years ago, that was in the era of SourceFed and Geek and Sundry and all of those really, really cool kind of conglomerates. Maker Studios was still a thing and was still exploiting all of their employees. Did I say that? I mean, allegedly. You had Polaris way back then. You had multi-channel networks were still a really, really big thing. They were necessary for you to be able to grow. And that's 11 years ago. That's it. So YouTube in 10 years, probably going to look very, very different. If we go back even further, if we go back to early YouTube, like 2007, 2008, when we're talking about channels like Smosh, where they had really, really crappy, low-quality videos, and then other things like Charlie the Unicorn and Charlie Bit My Finger. You know, YouTube was a meme factory when it first started out. And then it evolved, and then we got to remember Star Wars Kids and Star Wars Kid and Numa Numa, which I understand Numa Numa started on Newgrounds, but it's kind of all the same thing. And then we got to that kind of golden age where you had multi-channel networks like Machinima and Maker and all those other things, and then you started the YouTube, what do you call it? The YouTube $1 Million Initiative or whatever it was called. Basically, YouTube decided to put a bunch of money into creating original content and stuff like that, and that's where SourceFed came from. That's where Geek and Sundry came from. That's where there was a ton of really, really cool. I think Channel Federator came from that, where we got like Bravest Warriors and BM Puppy Cat and all that stuff. All that stuff came from this initiative that YouTube has wiped off the internet, by the way. Like, finding out about what that was and what it entailed is remarkably difficult. I believe there's a single Wikipedia page that talks about it, and YouTube pretends it never happened. But yeah, we had that boom of all of these kind of more corporate style YouTube programs, where instead of just a person talking to a camera, it was a person that had a writing team and had an editing team and had researchers and all that stuff. That's where all that stuff came from. We started seeing this huge jump in quality. And at the same time, you still had independent creators doing really, really well. And then we fast forward another 10 years, and now when you look at YouTube, it's completely different. Live plays are a really, really big deal now. Video essays have become massive. Movie recaps are a huge market that I didn't know existed until one day I accidentally clicked on one and I became hooked, because watching a 15-minute recap of a 2.5 hour long movie is really fun. Like, the market is constantly changing, and what MatPat has been doing for over a decade at this point has gotten to the point where it's run its course. And he, as a business owner and a creator, have kind of run his course as well. He is not quitting or anything like that, despite the fact that he made this big teary apology, acting like he was never going to exist on the internet again. It's not happening. You watch the video, it's not happening. I don't know why he was that emotional, other than the fact that big changes can be very emotional for a lot of people. But I've mentioned, I don't know if I've mentioned on here, but I've mentioned it to my friends. I never thought MatPat was a particularly adept business owner. The whole issue where he started trying to get people that had preferred stock in the company that screwed him over royally. to try and give up their preferred investments so that he could get his money first was just monumentally stupid. That's not how businesses work. He signed a contract that specifically stated this was how it's going to work. And just because he didn't understand how the contract works doesn't mean that now he gets to cry foul and go, well, it's not fair. You're bigger than I am, so I deserve the money more. No, they paid more money, so they get theirs first. That's why they paid more money. It's always how it's worked. And that's how it's worked for 100 years. Just because you've decided that you're special doesn't mean that you get special things. So, sorry, that's one of my least favorite things that I've ever seen on YouTube ever. So the idea that MatPat has finally decided to step down as a host, not particularly surprising to me. He has run his course as far as he could in that. And unless he wants to actually learn how to run a business well, he needs to find something else to do. And it seems like that's exactly what he's doing. Like, he mentioned that he has his own stuff that he's going to be focusing on. He's not 100% certain where that's going to go. That's a wonderful, fantastic thing. Especially for creatives. A lot of people don't understand the idea that creatives kind of need to constantly be reinventing themselves. They constantly need to be challenging them. And on the other side, creatives can't understand people that can work the same job for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years and do the same thing over and over again and somehow find that fulfilling. For some people, that is exactly what they want. And for some people, it's not. Every person's a little bit different, and every person should be treated as their own unique individual in that aspect. But yeah, so the idea that this is some massive catastrophe that somehow YouTube, or my favorite one, that YouTube is to blame because they've ruined everyone by forcing them to... No, they haven't. Again, everybody has to blame the algorithm for everything, and that YouTube is forcing content creators to create content that on a schedule that is completely unsustainable. No, it's not. However, you do have to understand how to run a fucking business. And the vast majority of YouTubers are creatives, which is great. I'm a creative, but I'm also creative that took the time to learn how a business works. And I will say conservatively, 80 to 90% of YouTubers do not understand business in any way, shape, or form. And some of them actively fight against learning how businesses work because they're like, ew, capitalism, yuck. It's not how it works. It's not how it's ever worked. Yes, the YouTubers that are getting burnt out because they're putting out, a video that takes 30 or 40 hours, 2 or 3 times a week. Yeah, that's 100%. That's burnout. Do they have to do that? Absolutely not. No one ever said that they had to do that. The algorithm doesn't force them to do that. However, they found a groove that worked and never thought about the idea of modifying it as their needs changed. No, they found one thing that worked, and they decided that is the only thing that is physically possible to ever work ever, and if we don't do it this same exact way every single time, the world will explode. It's not how it works. And again, every time somebody says, well, obviously this just doesn't do well on YouTube, I will say, no, you're 100% wrong, because there's at least one channel out there that is thriving on that. I love bringing up Smooth McGroove because he puts out such incredibly high quality, amazing content, and he will stop producing content for years at a time. And he's still doing it. He just came back from like a 1.5 or 2-year hiatus. Never announced anything, didn't announce a comeback, nothing like that. Just showed up in your feeds once. That's all it was. So this idea that the only way to exist on YouTube is to be putting out 17 videos a week that are all 14.73 minutes long and have this many advertisers and you have to do... You don't. But people that don't understand how to run a business will luck into a format that works and then won't have the business acumen to understand, okay, now we need to start modifying this. Now we need to look into other things. Now we need to diversify in order to be able to continue working. We see this in literally every other market. If we look at like the restaurant market, remember when buffets were huge? They were massive in the 80s and 90s. Now Buffets almost don't exist. They don't make anybody any money whatsoever. It's just how everything changed. There are businesses that were established for decades that just went belly up because technology changed and consumer interest changed. That's how the market works. It's how business works. And the companies that tend to be doing, the YouTubers specifically, that tend to be doing the best on YouTube have learned how to diversify and have learned how to change with the times to ensure that their business is healthy and to ensure that their employees, whether they are a single person or an entire team, are not being destroyed. And there's many different ways to do that. Probably the simplest way is to just hire more people and cut everybody's hours. But then we have to deal with the fact that people are making less money. You're technically giving out the same amount in you're giving out the same amount in payroll, but because it's being split over a wider audience, that means that something's wrong, and we get this strange idea that somehow this is wrong. No, this is how businesses work. You don't want people getting burnt out, then find ways to limit the amount of time that they're working. Find ways to vary their work style, and sometimes that means paying them less money because they're physically doing less work for you. And that's not a bad thing. If you are actively exploiting your employees by only giving them like 2 hours a week, that's a bad thing. But having an entire staff of exclusively full-time employees is a dumb business move. There are a lot of ways that you can work in part-time employees to ensure that your full-time employees are not getting burnt out and your part-time employees are getting some kind of benefit in addition to the money. It might be experience. It might just be the fact that part-time employment tends to be much more flexible than full-time employment so that they can do other things. Like there's a billion different ways that you can make sure that your company's not imploding upon itself. And as it gets bigger, that is an aspect of business, understanding when to expand and when to contract. The recent layoffs at Twitch, like everyone's talking about how Twitch isn't profitable. Oh, and that means it's going to end. No, there's lots of companies that aren't profitable that still do perfectly fine. The fact that Twitch is owned by Amazon and Amazon can use Twitch in a number of ways to make itself more profitable, even if Twitch itself is not profitable right now, means Twitch isn't going anywhere. All the layoffs at Twitch right now, oh, that means that Twitch is doing bad. No, we had an artificial recovery period created through influx of cash into the market through all of those, what were they called? The thing where the government just gave us money, which was monumentally stupid, by the way. So we basically had an artificial recovery period, and that made businesses act like they're in a recovery period. Once you get into a recovery period, you start increasing your employees so you can do more work and you can take advantage of a more healthy market until you get to your peak, and then you start going into recession, eventually into a depression, back to recovery period, a peak. And that's how it goes. We talked about the economic cycle before. Well, because it was an artificial recovery period, when the influx of money went away, we went into a significantly worse recession than would have been expected, because we technically should have been in a recession throughout this entire time period. And because of that artificial influx of money and the whole lockdown, the thing that made the recession significantly worse, now we are, we basically went from recovery. We jumped from recovery period to recession instantly without all of this up here, where all of this up here would normally be where they can kind of modify and they can lay off a few people and hire other people and shift people around. And so now they're getting rid of all the people that never should have been hired before. And a few people that should have been hired, but unfortunately, because of bad business decisions, we're also kind of caught in that. One of my favorite examples, and people will argue with me about this, and they're wrong, to be blunt. When Elon Musk took over Twitter, he fired 75% of the staff. He cut the staff by 75% and paid them all severance. And yet, since then, he has enacted more new features. He's enacted more new features in the last couple years than the entirety of the existence of Twitter. And it's still working for the most part well. Everyone will point out, well, Twitter did this. Twitter went down before. When it was being run by the morons that were the Cancel Society, Twitter had shit tons of problems. Twitter was a massively toxic place before Elon Musk took over. All the complaints about it now are the same exact complaints that people had before. They just don't like that the people that they don't like are no longer kicked off the platform. So now they have to deal with something that's not a massive echo chamber. So, yeah, I mean, Twitter was massively bloated with useless positions and people that did not add any value to the company whatsoever. And if I remember correctly, a few months ago, maybe it's closer to 6 months, Elon Musk mentioned that Twitter was actually profitable for the first time in forever. Because all the time that Twitter was run by the other morons like Jack Dorsey, it actually wasn't making money. It was funded entirely through venture capital and debt. But it wasn't profitable in any way, shape, or form. It wasn't until Elon Musk took it over that it started to become profitable. And I think after the ad issues where all these ad people claimed that they were going to leave, and then they did for a couple of weeks, and then they all started coming back. I don't know if it's currently profitable right now, but it's getting there. So yeah, all the firings at Twitter is because morons were running the company for a little while, and were hiring people that never should have been hired. There's one example that I'm not going to talk about because it'll just get people mad, but they made a huge deal about hiring this one particular person that should never have been hired in any way, shape, or form. They added no value to the company. It was a publicity stunt to make them look progressive, and it was a monumentally stupid thing to do to give this person power. So does that mean that everybody that got fired at Twitch deserved it? Absolutely not. There are a lot of good people who lost their jobs, and that always happens when stupid people make stupid decisions based on trying to make statements instead of what's going to be best for the business and the market. So going back to YouTube and why it's not screwed, I'm happy that MatPat's leaving. Not because I don't like his particular style of content. That's a completely separate thing. I like the fact that he's leaving because he's doing it in probably the best way he could. He has created an established company. He is removing himself from part of it, not all of it, in order to allow new talent to grow and thrive. That is an extremely good thing for the market. If you want a market to grow and thrive, you need skilled people in it. And the best way to learn those skills is by doing the job. So what's happening to MatPat is a fantastic thing. I know it makes him very sad. He'll get over it. Whatever he does next will probably be relatively successful. I don't think he's ever going to reach the heights of his peak when everything, but that's just a theory, a game theory, was on everybody's lips. But I sincerely doubt that he is, going to become destitute or anything like that. He's going to be perfectly fine, and his next project is probably going, for him personally, is probably going to be significantly more fulfilling creatively than what he's been doing for the past few years, because he mentioned in his video that he didn't like what he was doing. As far as, I think it was Tim Scott, something like that. I'm really bad with names. Again, he's not quitting. He's just not putting out a video every single day. He's going to be perfectly fine. Most of the other people that are quitting are simply kind of changing things how they go. And we should be expecting more companies leaving the market, because that's how markets work. And YouTube has removed so many barriers to entry. They have recently created kind of a pseudo partner program where you have the partner program, which requires 1,000 subscribers and what is it, like 4,000 hours of content watched and a bunch of other things if you want to be a partner. But now they have like a partner light program that only requires, I think it's like 750 or maybe it's 500 viewers and like 2,000 or 3,000 hours. Like, it's significantly easier. I still don't qualify for it, but who knows? Maybe I will someday. They are removing barriers to entry left and right. The number of companies that are willing to sponsor smaller YouTubers and smaller streamers is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The fact that you can supplement your YouTube income with Twitch and you can supplement your Twitch income with YouTube is not something that has ever existed before. The barriers to entry for YouTube have never been lower, even with the fact that you need to get good quality equipment somewhat, and you need to have a quality product, and you can't just, record on a phone and, make jokes about Pokemon and become the biggest channel ever. That version of YouTube doesn't exist anymore and hasn't existed for well over a decade. But the cost of, like, my whole mic setup here with this thing and the arm and everything, that whole setup is like $200 now. It's not expensive at all compared to, the cost of like a really, really fancy condenser mic and a soundboard and, DSLR, yeah, that's what it's called, camera and all that stuff. You can do really well with just a $100 webcam, and again, my whole setup's like $200 for the mic and stuff, but you can easily get by with like $100 microphone, no problem. You can get by with a lot less if you're willing to put a little bit more work in. So yeah, the barriers to entry to YouTube never been lower. People are going to leave the market. That's the sign of a healthy market, is that companies should be leaving it on a regular basis and new companies should be entering it on a regular basis. It's how it works, and that's a good thing. New companies entering the market are going to bring new ideas, are going to increase competition, which is going to improve quality for everyone, and there isn't a downside to consumers other than the fact that it's possible your favorite brand might not always be available. Oopsies. But it'll be replaced by something even more exciting and more interesting. It's just how it works. So, yeah, this is probably the earliest I have ever recorded one of these videos, because I woke up and I watched a video where people are trying to theorize, well, what is this going to mean for YouTube? And again, it's a bunch of people that just don't understand how business works. That's my biggest issue with YouTube and YouTubers in general, is it's a bunch of creatives, which isn't a bad thing. Again, I'm a creative, but it's a bunch of creatives that actively refuse to learn how businesses work and then get really, really surprised and freak the fuck out when businesses work the exact way they're supposed to and not the way that their imaginary mind made it out to be. Really good example, and I hate to kind of bring this one up, simply because I know people that helped work on this, and from the beginning I knew this was going to be a failure. And what I'm doing right now is I just want to check the channel real quick.
Is Jennifer Kretschmer?
Stop it. That's the channel right there. Channel. It's called Tabletop News. Tabletop News did this amazing, incredible thing. You want to know what they did? They went on Kickstarter. I think it was Kickstarter. It's one of the crowdfunding platforms. And they go, we are going to be the new... source of tabletop news. You know how we're going to do that? We're going to pay these people a lot of money, because we've decided that's what they're worth. And Tabletop News, they asked, I think it was $100,000 that they asked for, because they were going to spend $10,000 an episode. so that they could pay their editors the money that they felt that they were worth, and they were going to pay their hosts the money that they felt that they were worth. And they based all of this idea off of, well, this is how much it's going to cost us to pay the people what we want to pay them. And didn't take the time to look at, okay, well, how are you going to make that much money so that you can continue paying them? What are you going to do to create a business that makes more than $10,000 an episode? Well, we don't need to do that because we're going to pay them what they're worth. And you know what? Tabletop News on YouTube has 8,360 subscribers. Most of their videos get few hundred views. So the vast majority of their audience is not watching. The only videos that they do really well on are their specific tabletop news episodes. They paid for 10 in advance, and they only get 120,000 views, which on YouTube, for a channel that was crowdfunded and boasts all this talent and all this stuff and how much they're paying people, is shit. It really, really is. And I don't understand how they get those views, because again, those videos do super, super well. All the rest of their videos, 143 views, 163 views, 119 views, 131 views. Their most recent video is 429 views, and it's an interview with a woman named Jennifer Kretschmer. That's what you guys heard. And it's a 4-minute long video, so it's not even a massive video for people to have to sit through. It's a really, really short video. They just don't do well. Their most popular video is 143,000 views, and they talk about Critical Role. I can't get that many views. But any D&D YouTuber worth their salt that has a decent following can get 100,000 views on a Critical Role video. It's Critical Role prints money. My Critical Role videos are generally some of my top viewed videos on here, and they do particularly well. The fact that they only got 143,000 views on that, it's insane. And again, it's not that they didn't have a good idea. They had a great idea. I really would have loved to see them do well. They went about it the exact wrong way. It's a bunch of creatives that got together and said, I think I'm worth this much. And so then I'm going to find a way to give me this much money. Okay, well, how are you going to do that? Well, we're going to create a company that pays me this much. Okay, well, how's that company going to make money? Well, because that's how much I'm worth. No, sorry, that's not how it works. You first have to have a company that makes that much money so that they can pay you. The original goal for them was, by the time they got done with their initial 10-episode run, which ended in late December of last year, they were going to have sponsors that were going to be able to do this. But by the way, that's not a bad plan for a YouTube channel, is to live mostly on sponsors, and the idea that they can get $10,000 a week through sponsors is actually not that far outside the realm of reason for an established channel. If you've got a few hundred thousands or like 1 million subscribers, yeah, you can make that money real easy. If you don't, then no one's going to pay. No one is going to pay $10,000 a week to a channel that has less than 10,000 subscribers. They're just not. No one is going to pay $10,000 a week for a channel that barely gets 100 views on most of their videos. What this company, what they should have done is started with, okay, let's create a company. Let's find a way to create something that is unique, find a way to get all of our systems in place, start with a skeleton crew, start with people that are being underpaid so that we can establish the company, build it up to the point where we can afford to pay people what they're worth, and then do this. No, they decided, no, we're going to start at the end point and go, this is how much I believe that we are worth, and therefore we are going to pay everyone this much money, and money will just appear somehow. It's not how it works. It's never how it has ever worked. but it's a bunch of creatives that don't know how businesses run, deciding that this is how it works. So many people have this misconception about businesses where the higher ups just get to print money and fuck themselves all day, and the lower echelon people do all of the work and create all the value for the company and should own the companies. And that's never been how it works. It's never will be how it works. The people at the top are up there because they worked their asses off, most of them for 20 or 30 years before getting there. They're extremely knowledgeable. They make incredibly difficult decisions, and they know things about the business that most people at the bottom would never even fathom. Does that mean they're not corrupt? Absolutely not. Corruption is rampant in this country and all around the world. There's a lot of corrupt people in a lot of really high positions. Not saying it's not corrupt. What I am saying is belittling them to just stupid, corrupt morons that just lucked into money is moronic. No, they're incredibly intelligent, corrupt people. And they work extremely hard for their corrupted money. So stop thinking that capitalism is the enemy. It's not how it works. And Tabletop News is a prime example of what not to do. And again, I haven't been saying this publicly because, again, I know a few people that worked on it. And again, I'm sad for them for the amount of effort that they put into this, hoping that it would become a thing. But it was doomed from the start. It was never going to be good. Or not good. It was never going to be sustainable because they started it on a false premise of I get to choose how much money my company makes, not let's find a way to make money. You don't get to just declare that this is how much money your company makes. They do let you do that in business school. I did that for my capstone, where I just got to decide how many clients I got for a marketing company that I created. That was really profitable, by the way. Like, it took us like 6 months to get out of our initial debt. It was amazing. They were also made up numbers. And funny enough, my made up numbers still didn't add up, and they made me redo the accounting section because accounting was created by the devil. But yeah, no, this idea of we get to decide how much our company makes is not how it works. We get to decide what our profit margins are. Nope, not how it works. Never has been. You need to do the work to figure out how a company works, and what they should have been doing instead of pushing all this money. And that was the other thing that kind of clued me into the fact that this was not going to go well, is they barely made their goal. They made it within, I want to say within a few hours before it ended. They finally got up to their goal, because if they hadn't, it wasn't a flexible funding thing. They would have gotten absolutely nothing. It would have been dead in the water. Again, I don't know what happened but behind the scenes. Whether I legally, I don't know if they're allowed to put in their own money to get over the hump or not. I'd have to look into Kickstarter and stuff like that. And I'm not saying that's what happened either. Please do not misinterpret that. But the fact that the money came in just before the buzzer always felt a little bit weird. Not that anything underhanded went on, but it just, from a business perspective, that is not a good sign, because the amount of money that they were asking for was tiny in comparison to what they were going to need to function for a single year. So yeah, the fact that they could barely get enough to make 10 episodes was a bad sign. And now we're seeing it. They haven't published anything in a few weeks, basically since the New Year's has started. And their Twitter has been dead since New Year's. The last episode that they put out was December 21st. So basically, since December 21st, they have done absolutely nothing. They released one video that got barely any views on it, and ever since then, they've been nothing. And that is a perfect example of what I'm talking about here, of people that just don't understand how business works. They don't understand that YouTube is a business. Being a YouTuber is a business. So, yeah, anyway, YouTube's not dying. YouTube is acting like a very, very healthy market. The things that are happening right now with big YouTubers quitting, which they're not, but let's pretend they are, is a good thing. MatPat is a perfect example of a good way for this to happen, where he steps down and allows new content creators to learn from all the mistakes that he made and make their own mistakes. All of this is wonderful and amazing. We need to stop predicting that everything's going to die, because it's not. We're in a recession right now. Don't argue with me about that. I know more about economics than you do. Sorry, the reason I say that, I was in a comment section somewhere months ago, and I mentioned, yeah, well, this isn't really that big a deal, and we are in a recession right now. They're like, what? What do you mean? Where's the 3 quarters of negative GDP growth? We're not in a recession. I said, yeah, we're in a recession, okay? And they had to change the definition of recession, because the old definition of recession, which most economists still use, is 2 periods of negative GDP growth, not 3. And again, we had a false recovery period where we just infused money that didn't exist into the market to make it look like we weren't in a recession that we caused ourselves. We're in a recession. We have been since, 2020. It's how recessions work. Anyway, that's all for me today. I hope somebody found this incoherent nonsense enjoyable. Anyway, that's all for me today. I will see you guys in the next time. All right? Bye-bye.